Okay, we're here at a vacant commercial today. It's a balmy 15 degrees in southeastern Wisconsin. We're going to be going through pulling hinges on a commercial door, specifically the metal door, metal jamb, hinges that are exposed, outward opening. Now this is a technique that, or a question I should say, that we get periodically in the forcible entry classes that we teach. Students will ask, how difficult is it to pull these types of hinges, and when, if ever, would you do it? Now I gotta be honest with you, pulling hinges on these types of doors is gonna be a rare event. It's not something that we're gonna always do. As far as a specific example on when we would do it.
When you look at this door and the number of locks, as well as the indicators for how substantial the slide bolts are, this is one example where you may want to consider attacking the hinges versus the lock side.
Another example might be where you're looking at this door and you want to completely remove the door from the jamb, the frame. You want it just completely out of your way. So you're not only taking the locks, but you're taking the hinges.
As you see here, with the door completely removed from the jamb, you won't have to worry about securing the door or have it accidentally closing.
Maybe not the two best examples, but about the best that I can give you. In the end, pulling hinges on these types of doors, like I said, is going to be a rare event. 99% of the time, we're going to attack the lock side of the door. And if you know how to use your irons properly, you're going to be able to defeat many, if not most, of the doors you're going to encounter. So how challenging, how difficult is it? Well, taking these hinges isn't impossible. We're doing this video to give you a perspective on how much effort is involved and how much time it takes. It's definitely going to take more time and more effort than pulling hinges off of a wood door, wood jamb, but it can be done. As far as our approach methods for actually pulling the hinges, there's a couple different schools of thought. Some firefighters believe in attacking the top hinge and working their way down. We believe more in attacking the bottom hinge and working our way up. If we attack that top hinge and we pull it, and that door starts to fold out, fire conditions are going to convect out the top, heat, smoke, fire, and start to bank down and compromise our position. Not really on the outside unless we had a canopy, but it could happen on the inside. Attacking the bottom hinges and working our way up, gravity works in our favor. The door stays in place until we take that top hinge and finish it. So that's our belief. Bottom, work your way up. As far as attacking the hinges themselves, a couple other schools of thought there. Some believe in pre-shocking the hinge. So taking your striking tool, now ideally your striking tool should weigh at least 8 pounds. It's an 8-pound flathead axe. If you still got 6-pound axes, we think you should chrome them, either put them on the wall or give them to your honor guard. So 8-pound and up, 10-pound sledge or maul, and to come down and you're going to smash this hinge with the goal being shearing the screws that are going into the door and the jamb. Now those screws, you're going to have 8 usually. 4 going in the door, 4 going in the jamb. They're usually short. They got a very thin, fine thread to them. When you're smashing down, you're shock loading the hinge. You're trying to shear those screws, or at least displace them enough so you can pull the hinge.
When you look closely at the hinge cavities for both the door and the jamb, you can see where the screw heads for each side of the hinge have been sheared off. Here's a close-up of the hinge itself, as well as the broken screw heads.
Some believe in taking your Halligan bar and placing the fork on the top of the hinge or bottom and striking down. And they believe that this, in essence, saves a step. You're not only creating the drive on the top of the adze on the fork to create that shearing force, but you're also getting the displacement from the width of the fork to pull the hinge away from the door and the jamb. Now this is all fine and good on the bottom, but now if I'm going to work on that middle hinge, you can see it's not really practical for me to hit at the top of the adze. It's too high. I'm not a tall guy. I'm only 5'10". You have to be 7 feet to really get a good downward force. And if I decide to slide the shaft and hit the shoulders of the fork, I don't really have enough drive. So the middle hinge becomes kind of problematic, whether you go top or bottom. And the top hinge, again, a little high to shock from up above, but I can try it from down below, or I could use a combination. Use the fork and then drive like so. What we found in our experience is maybe combining techniques is on the bottom hinge, place it, get your drive and spread, pre-shock the middle hinge alone, and then place the fork, and then you really got your choice of going fork or Halligan bar or pre-shocking. on the top. That's your choice. So with all that being said, let's show you what it looks like.
One of the best ways to attack the bottom hinge is to place the fork of the Halligan bar right on top of it and drive down on the head of the adze. Here we got lucky and we were able to knock the hinge completely off. Realize though that in most cases you're going to have to leverage the Halligan bar to remove the hinge from the door and the jamb. The Halligan Firefighter should watch the hinge closely for any movement as it's being hit. This will be your best indicator on when you can attempt to pull it. The hinge will usually get wedged in the fork of the Halligan bar, and there's two ways to remove it. One is to use your striking tool, while the other is to simply use a portion of the building itself. One of the best ways to attack the middle hinge is to pre-shock it. In this case, we were able to fracture the screws with just a few hits. This gave us enough displacement that we were able to easily pull it. This middle hinge was slightly more challenging as it was lower profile and not as pronounced. So after pre-shocking, we also had to hit the head of the adze to get the fork into a better position. You could accomplish the same thing by sliding the shaft of the Halligan and hitting the shoulders of the fork, as long as they're squared off. Once we had a good grab of the hinge, we were able to pull it quite easily. One of the easiest and most efficient ways for pulling the top hinge is to use the Halligan bar in the same manner that we demonstrated for attacking the bottom hinge. In this case, we're just reversing the tool and coming from below the hinge. The top hinge is usually the most difficult to remove due to its height and the angle of leverage. With this in mind, it's very important that you get a good drive on the head of the adze in order to set the fork properly. Remember, the Halligan Firefighter should watch the hinge closely for any movement. This will be your best indicator on when you can attempt to pull it. This door was a perfect example of how difficult it can be for attacking and pulling hinges on a metal door with a metal jamb. On this bottom hinge alone, we spent more than 5 minutes trying to pull it, and in the end, we were unsuccessful in completely removing the hinge from the door and the jamb. This alone reinforces the importance of having a backup plan, as well as bringing up your circular saw to the scene, so you can switch to another method or mode of attack. If the bottom hinge isn't pulling easily, this is your indicator on when to move to the next one or to switch to plan B. What we didn't realize until we pulled the remaining hinges is that the screws on the jamb side of the hinge sheared early on, but as you can see in this photo, the screws on the door side of the hinge remained intact. The hinge itself as well as the door started to bend, which prevented these screws from shearing. In the end, this didn't inhibit us from removing the door from the jamb, but it did cause us to waste a considerable amount of time. This top hinge was a little bit more challenging for a couple reasons. First of all, because of the additional height due to the lower step, and second, because of the restricted area that we had to work in due to the railings. Remember, your best indicator on when to attempt to pull the hinge is when you see movement after the Halligan bar has been hit. If you're unable to pull the hinge with the bevel toward the door, you can reverse the fork and go bevel to hinge. This will give you additional spread and more leverage, which will sometimes help you to finish the hinge off. Your next option is to put 2 firefighters on the tool, which will give you more strength. This was difficult for us because of the railing, so we decided to switch back to driving the fork. Remember, you can drive the fork with the bevel toward the hinge as well. Once you see adequate movement, you can make another attempt. Here the railing became an advantage because it gave us a better angle of pull. With a little persistence, we were finally able to finish this hinge off.
once we pulled all the hinges, we're going to take advantage of that vacated cavity space from where the hinge was located to place the blade of our adze so we can start to pull the door away from the hinge side of the jamb. Now if you look at this gap, it's larger than what you would normally see. This is a very heavy duty door. It's a very heavy duty hinge plate, but even on a standard commercial door, that gap is going to be large enough for us to easily place the blade of the adze. We specifically want to attack the middle hinge because that's in the center plane of the door. Place the adze, get it as deep as you can because you want to grab as much of the door as possible. If that's not enough, remember we have the ability to crush down and up to give us the biggest purchase as possible, with the ultimate goal then of getting the blade of the adze to the back side of the door, which will give us the most leverage. In most cases though, you'll be able to start the process just by placing the adze. I want to start pulling the door now away from the jamb. I want it to completely clear the frame, and ideally the entire frame of the wall, not just the jamb. Once I do that and I can get my hands to the back side of the door, I can start to pull the door out. Remember, most commercial doors are going to be at least 36 inches wide or even wider. So the door itself can be used as a lever just like your Halligan bar can. And this pro bar is only 30 inches, so now we got a door, this one's 48, but a standard door being 36, you can grab that door, start to pry out, and create a shearing force on the locks. If we're unable to completely snap those locks, hopefully we're going to displace them enough so that the lock side of the door is going to start to drop away from that side of the jamb. Then, to get this door to drop away, we can use the blade of the axe as a wedge to hold that gap and keep it away from the frame. Come on this side and start to slide or work the lock side of the door to start to pull those deadbolts away from their strikes or keepers. Then the door should hopefully just completely fall out of the frame and jamb entirely. So that's our methodology, our basic approach to removing the door after we pulled the hinges.
Remember that many, if not most commercial doors will also have some type of self-closing device that we'll have to contend with when attacking the hinge side. These can vary in size and strength and can be a challenge to remove just in themselves. One of the easiest ways to defeat the self-closing device is to use the door itself as leverage. By twisting, turning, and pulling on the door, you can create torque on the assembly, causing it to fail at its weakest point. If you're still not convinced that pulling hinges on a commercial door should be a last resort, take a look at these security hinges. If you look closely, you can see a post on both the jamb and door side of the hinge plate. These posts go into holes on either or both the door and the jamb and can act exactly like a deadbolt. This can make pulling these types of hinges extremely difficult, if not impossible. Here are some final thoughts. When you're assigned forcible entry, consider bringing both the irons and the circular saw, which will provide you the most tactical options and allow you to easily transition from plan A to plan B. Remember your basics, such as trying before you pry and taking time to size up the door to determine the best course of action. This would include an approach from the lock side first and only attacking the hinges as a last resort. I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching.